High Commander K'Zoth's secondary heart skipped a beat as the alert echoed through the command center. The quantum detection grid had never failed them before, yet here it was, screaming warnings that should have come hours earlier. A human warship had somehow slipped through their outer defense network. Report. The commander's scales flickered with agitation as multiple holographic displays materialized around the command podium. Omega-class destroyer, ancient Earth classification, Senior Sensor Officer Vix announced, their voice modulator struggling to maintain composure. But the readings, they don't match any known configuration. The vessel's profile was unmistakably human. All sharp angles and exposed weapon ports, a design philosophy that had always struck the Zixas-Thulians as unnecessarily aggressive. But something was different. Where energy readings should have shown the distinctive signature of charged plasma cannons, there was only the quiet hum of medical-grade containment fields. Impossible, K'Zoth muttered, all four eyes fixed on the central display. Bring up the historical records. The archives confirmed their suspicions. This was the U.S. Montana, a ship that had single-handedly held off 3 Harvester hive fleets during the Battle of Proxima. Its very name had been used to frighten young Sexthulians into good behavior. Behave, or the Montana will come for you. But the ship before them now bore different markings. The once proud battle scars had been repaired, its hull repainted in white and red. Where the naval designation once stood, new characters spelled out UNSS Mercy. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Communications Officer Zithra announced, their throat sacs pulsing with confusion. Using every known language in the database. K'Zoth's command podium automatically translated the message. This is Commander Jessica Walker of the UNSS Mercy, former U.S. Montana, operating under Emergency Protocol 793. We are an unarmed medical transport carrying critical vaccine supplies. Multiple species are affected. Time is of the essence. Please respond. The command center fell silent. The concept of converting a warship, especially one as legendary as the Montana, into a medical transport was so alien that several officers had to run self-diagnostics on their translation implants. Scan for weapons, K'Zoth ordered, their scales now shifting to a deep purple of uncertainty. That's the thing, High Commander, Vixth responded, running the scan 3 times to be sure. The weapon systems appear to have been completely retrofitted. The main cannon housing contains what appears to be a massive refrigeration unit. The missile bays, they're storing something, but it's not ordnance. The energy signature matches medical-grade biomatter. The human ship maintained its position, running with shields down, a display of either supreme confidence or complete madness. The Zixas-Thulian battle computer calculated 14 different scenarios where their defense fleet could destroy the vessel before it could raise its defenses. Yet something about the situation made K'Zoth's combat instincts waver. Another message coming through, Zithra announced. Text only this time. The words that scrolled across the command displays would change the sector forever. Your outer colony on Zixithu Prime has 12 hours before the plague reaches critical levels. We have the cure. The choice is yours, but every minute spent in deliberation costs lives. We stand ready to help, because that's what humans do. K'Zoth's scales shifted to the deep blue of command decision. They had spent their entire career preparing to fight humans. Now they had to decide whether to trust them. Launch the alert fighters, K'Zoth finally ordered, their voice heavy with the weight of consequence. But tell them to escort, not engage. It seems we're about to learn whether humans can be as good at saving lives as they are at taking them. The Zixas-Thulian battle fleet formed a perfect hexagon around the UNSS Mercy, their gunports tracking the converted warship with uneasy precision. Through the command center's enhanced viewing screens, High Commander K'Zoth could see the changes made to the legendary vessel. Where once mighty shield generators had protected weapon systems, now stood arrays of communication beacons and medical sensor pods. Boarding Party Alpha is ready for inspection, Lieutenant Zextra reported, their combat scales bristling with anticipation. All members are equipped with Class 5 containment suits and emergency response protocols. Zoth watched as the boarding shuttles approached the human vessel. The Montana's history flashed through their mind. 3 campaigns, 17 major battles, and now this. The ship that had once been the scourge of the Outer Rim was allowing itself to be boarded without so much as a shield flicker. The first images from the boarding party caused a wave of gasps across the command center. The main hangar bay, once home to squadrons of strike fighters, had been transformed into a massive trade center. Medical drones, clearly modified from military models, hovered at ready stations, their weapon mounts now supporting advanced diagnostic tools. Commander Jessica Walker met the boarding party personally. Her uniform was a study in contradictions. The crisp military cut remained, but the combat insignias had been replaced with medical corps emblems. She stood with the bearing of a warrior, yet her eyes held something the Zixthulians had never expected to see in a human commander: compassion. "Welcome aboard the Mercy." Walker's words were translated through the ship's advanced communication systems. "I understand your caution, but time is critical. Our sensors indicate that the Crimson Plague has already reached your colony's 3rd population center." The boarding party's leader, Major Kickstall, maintained their defensive stance. "Our records show this vessel destroyed 3 hive fleets at Proxima. Why should we believe this is not some form of strategic deception?" Walker's response was to lead them to what had once been the ship's primary artillery deck. The massive doors slid open to reveal a sight that defied all Zixthulian military intelligence. Row upon row of stasis pods, each containing carefully maintained vaccine cultures. "Because," Walker explained, gesturing to the endless lines of medical supplies, "this is what the Montana was always meant for. We built her to protect, to serve. Sometimes that meant fighting. Today, it means healing." The ship's former combat information center had been transformed into something the Zixthulians could barely comprehend. Where battle plans had once been plotted, complex medical data flowed across holographic displays. The plague's spread was tracked with the same precision once used to target enemy fleets. "Our immune systems," Walker continued, pulling up detailed genetic displays, "evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived by adapting, by turning every threat into an opportunity to grow stronger. When we realized we were naturally resistant to the Crimson Plague, we didn't just develop a cure. We developed a way to share our immunity." Major Kickstall's sensor scales detected no deception, no hidden weapons, nothing but the urgent truth of Walker's words. The boarding party's medical officer confirmed what their equipment was telling them. The vaccines were real, and they were perfect. "High Commander," Kickstall transmitted back to the fleet, the human vessel. "It's exactly what they claim. They've turned one of their most powerful weapons of war into something we never considered possible." Zoth received the report with all 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display. The colony's latest medical data was scrolling across their screens, each update more dire than the last. They had minutes, not hours, to make a decision that would echo across the sector for generations. "Commander Walker," Kazoth's voice carried the weight of centuries of conflict and mistrust. "You have 1 hour to prove that humans can save lives as efficiently as they take them. Do not make me regret this decision." Major Kickstall's boarding party froze in their tracks as the massive doors to the former artillery bay slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The space before them defied everything they'd been taught about human warships. Gone were the rows of Thunder-class rail cannons that had once decimated the Harvester fleets. In their place stood something far more remarkable. "This," Commander Walker announced, her voice carrying the same authority that had once directed fleet actions, is what we call Operation Sanctuary. The entire bay had been transformed into a state-of-the-art medical research facility. Quantum computers, their processing cores originally designed to calculate firing solutions, now ran complex genetic analysis. The air hummed with the gentle whir of medical drones, their chassis still bearing the faded paint of their combat origins. "Impossible," Lieutenant Zextra whispered, their sensor scales vibrating with disbelief. "The power requirements alone." Walker smiled, leading them to a central control station. "We redirected the main weapon system's power grid. Turns out the energy needed to punch through battleship armor is more than enough to run a few thousand cryo storage units." The Thulian medical officer, Dr. Vexthal, moved forward to examine the nearest research station. Their multiple eyes widened as they processed the data streaming across the screens. "These are human genome sequences," Vexthal announced, their voice modulator crackling with excitement. "But they've been modified, adapted. You found a way to make your natural immunity compatible with other species." "Necessity is the mother of invention," Walker replied, bringing up a holographic display of the vaccine development process. "When we realized the plague couldn't affect us, we knew we had a responsibility. Every human ship in this sector has been retrofitted for medical transport and research." The display showed the evolution of the project, from the first discovery of human immunity to the development of a universal vaccine. The same tactical systems that had once tracked enemy movements now monitored the spread of the disease, predicting its path with terrifying accuracy. "Here," Walker continued, leading them to what had once been the ship's targeting center. "This is where we coordinate everything." The room had been transformed into a disease response hub that made the Zixithulians' most advanced medical facilities look primitive by comparison. Real-time data from a dozen worlds flowed through systems originally designed to direct fleet combat operations. "Your colony on Zixthu Prime," Walker indicated a pulsing red icon, "is here. The plague is moving through the population centers in a pattern we've seen before. But if we act now..." She touched a control, and the display shifted to show deployment vectors. The same precision that had once guided missile strikes now plotted the most efficient distribution of medical aid. Dr. Vexthal's analysis confirmed what their eyes were telling them. "The delivery system, it's perfect. You're using military supply lines for medical distribution. Wars taught us how to move resources quickly under the worst conditions," Walker explained. "We're just changing what we transport." A alert chimed through the chamber. Another update from Zixthu Prime. The infection rate had accelerated. Walker's expression hardened into one the Zixthulians recognized from battle records. The look of a commander about to enter combat. "We're out of time for tours," she announced, her voice taking on the edge that had once directed fleet actions. "Your people are dying. We have the cure. Do we have permission to begin emergency distribution?" Major Kickstall's scales shifted through colors of conflict before settling on the deep blue of decision. They activated their direct link to High Command. "High Commander Kazoth," they reported, "the humans have done the impossible. They haven't just converted their weapons. They've transformed their entire approach to warfare. Request immediate authorization for emergency medical intervention." The response came back almost instantly. "Permission granted. May the stars help us all." Commander Walker was already moving before the translation finished, her crew jumping into action with military precision. The UNSS Mercy's engines hummed to life, but this time, they would not carry death to an enemy. Instead, they would race to bring life to those who had once been their greatest foes. The command center of the UNSS Mercy erupted into controlled chaos as emergency reports flooded the communications network. Commander Walker stood at the center of the storm, her expression fixed in the same focused determination that had once guided the Montana through the Battle of Proxima. Multiple outbreak sites confirmed. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes reported from the communications station, her hands dancing across the holographic interface. New Shera colony has gone dark. Zexthu Prime's medical facilities are at 200% capacity. 3 more colony worlds just declared emergency status. Walker's response was immediate. Deploy the BattleNet, Medical Response Network. She corrected herself, the old terms still lingering in her military mind. The massive display screen that had once shown enemy fleet positions now illuminated with a web of emergency response vectors. "Show me the other ships," she commanded, and the display expanded to reveal a sight that made the Zexthulian officers present catch their breath. 50 former human warships, each as legendary as the Montana, were spreading across the sector. The dreaded dreadnought Thunderchild, now the UNSS Hope. The devastating cruiser Excalibur, transformed into the UNSS Healing Light. Dr. Vexthal's analytical scales flickered with recognition. You knew how bad this would be before anyone else did. Walker nodded, her eyes never leaving the strategic display. We've seen this pattern before. Earth's history is written in plagues and pandemics. The way this disease spreads, the infection vectors, it's almost identical to the Great Influenza of 1918. We recognized the signs 3 weeks ago. The display showed another colony going dark, its communication lines falling silent. Walker's jaw tightened. Hayes, get me Fleet Command. The screen shifted to show the commanders of the other converted warships, each wearing the same determined expression, each standing on a bridge that had been transformed from war to healing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walker addressed them, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Execute Protocol Phoenix. You all know the pattern. You know what's at stake. These people don't have 3 weeks for use to play nice with local bureaucracies. Deploy everything we've got." High Commander Kazoth, who had been observing from their own command post, felt their scales shift to the purple of revelation. "You're using battle strategies to fight a disease. Every enemy has a pattern," Walker replied, as multiple symbols on the display began to move. "Diseases are no different. They attack, they spread, they establish beachheads. So we counter them, the same way we'd counter any invasion." The strategy became clear as they watched. Supply lines were established using the same routes once used for military convoys. Emergency response teams deployed with the precision of special forces units. The massive computer systems that had once calculated missile trajectories now predicted infection vectors with terrifying accuracy. "New contact," Hayes called out. "Medical transport from the outer colonies just dropped out of jump space." They're running hot, Commander. Engine core is critical." Walker's response was pure military command. "Direct them to Landing Bay 3. Alert Medical Team Delta for hot extraction. Engineering, stand by with containment fields." She turned to the Zexthulian officers. "Your people are on that ship. I need authorization to override their safety protocols and get them out before that core breaches." Kazoth's response came without hesitation. "Granted. Save them." The next 10 minutes demonstrated why humanity's military efficiency had been so feared. The rescue operation unfolded with breathtaking precision. Emergency teams moving with the same speed and coordination that had once been used to board enemy vessels. When the transport's core finally failed, its crew and passengers were already safe in the Mercy's medical bay. 67 survivors extracted, Hayes reported. All stable. Medical teams report multiple cases of advanced infection, but we got to them in time. Walker finally allowed herself a small smile. "Send word to all ships. This is how we win. Not by fighting the enemy we expected, but by saving everyone we can. Now, let's show these people what a human battle fleet can really do when we're fighting for life instead of death." Dr. Vexthal had never seen anything like it. These Thulian medical officers stood in the converted fighter bay of the UNSS Mercy, watching human crisis response teams move with the fluid grace of combat units. Where launch rails had once sent fighters screaming into battle, medical pods now glided on magnetic tracks, each one a self-contained treatment center. Incoming priority alert from Colony 7. Lieutenant Hayes' voice echoed through the chamber. Environmental systems failing in the primary medical center. They're losing power to the quarantine zone. Commander Walker's response was immediate. Initialize Plan Delta. Launch medical response pods 1 through 6. Engineering. Prepare the portable generator modules. The Thulian observers watched in amazement as what appeared to be chaos resolved into perfect order. Crews that had once loaded military ordnance now prepared medical supplies with the same precision. Former combat engineers calibrated life support systems with the same focus they'd once given to weapon systems. Your people, High Commander Kazoth observed through the command link. They move as if this were combat. Because for us, it is, Walker replied, her eyes on the deployment schedule. The enemy's just different. Instead of shields, we're fighting failing life support. Instead of enemy fire, we're dodging system failures. The stakes are just as high. A young human engineer named Michael Chen approached the commander, holding a holographic display of the colony's layout. We've got a problem, man. The colony's power grid is too unstable for standard deployment. We need to try something new. Walker studied the display, her expression shifting to one the Thulians had seen in historical battle footage, the look of a commander about to try something unprecedented. Show me the old combat drop zones, she ordered, and new markers appeared on the map. Now overlay the current critical care areas. The pattern that emerged made Dr. Vexthal's analytical scales flutter with sudden understanding. The military landing zones, they're all within optimal range of the critical facilities. Because they were chosen for maximum strategic impact, Walker explained, a grim smile forming. Chen, prep the shadow units for emergency deployment. Full medical configuration. The engineer's eyes widened. The stealth insertion pods. But Mom, they're not. They were designed to insert combat teams under heavy fire. Walker cut him off. The shielding will handle any environmental hazards, and they're already set up for independent power supply. We're just changing the payload from soldiers to medical staff. The next hour was a symphony of repurposed military precision. The sleek black pods that had once carried special forces teams now housed emergency medical units. Each one was a self-contained hospital, powered by the same fusion cells that had once energized combat shields. Launch window in 3 minutes, Hayes announced. Colony environmental systems at 17% and falling. Walker turned to the medical teams preparing to board the pods. Many of them were former combat medics, their battle-trained reflexes now turned to a different kind of fight. You know the drill, she addressed them. Just like a combat drop, except this time we're not taking the field. We're taking back lives. Engineering has modified the pod's life support to create sterile zones on impact. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and show these people what humanity does best. The launch sequence began, and Dr. Vexthal watched as the pods shot down the same rails that had once launched fighters. They streaked through the colony's deteriorating atmosphere like falling stars, each one carrying not death, but a desperate change for life. Pods have landed, Hayes reported. All units report successful deployment. Medical teams are. They're already working, Commander. First stabilization reports coming in. High Commander Kasoth's voice carried a note of awe. In all our studies of human military capability, we never imagined this. You've turned the very thing we feared into something remarkable. Walker's response was quiet but firm. That's because you only saw us fight wars. You never saw us fight for something more important. This This is what we were building toward all along. We just didn't know it until now. The emergency alert cut through the ship's communication network like a plasma blade. New Shera colony's main atmospheric processor had failed, and the backup systems were rapidly deteriorating. 5 million Zixthulian lives hung in the balance. Status report. Commander Walker's voice carried the sharp edge of combat readiness as she strode onto the bridge. The massive display showed the colony's life support systems failing one by one, like stars winking out in a dying galaxy. Environmental control is at critical levels, Lieutenant Hayes reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. They've lost 3 secondary processors, and the main core is showing signs of cascade failure. Estimate 12 minutes until total system collapse. Walker's expression hardened into what her crew called her battle face. Show me the colony schematics. Full technical overlay. The display shifted, revealing the complex network of systems that kept the colony alive. Dr. Vexthal moved forward, their medical sensors whirring as they analyzed the data. The plague has infected the bioneural interfaces, they announced, their voice modulator crackling with distress. It's not just killing our people, it's corrupting our technology. Chen, Walker called out, remember that crazy idea you had about the shield generators? The young engineer stepped forward, his eyes lighting up with understanding. Yes, Mom. But we'd need at least 3 heavy lift shuttles and a full engineering team. The power requirements alone would be exactly what we have. Walker cut him off. Because this ship still has its original power core, the one designed to run every weapon system simultaneously during battle. Understanding rippled through the bridge crew. The Montana's power core had been legendary, strong enough to punch through capital ship shields and still maintain full combat operations. Hayes, Sound General Quarters. Full emergency response protocol. Walker's commands came rapid fire now, each word carrying the weight of years of combat experience. I want every former combat engineer in Launch Bay 2 in 5 minutes. Medical teams, prepare for mass casualty response. This just became a combat operation. We're just fighting physics instead of enemy ships. The UNSS Mercy's corridors erupted with activity. Crew members who had once run to battle stations now rushed to their emergency response posts. The ship's massive engines, originally designed for high-speed combat maneuvers, powered up with a deep thrum that vibrated through the hull. High Commander Soth watched from their command center as the human vessel moved into position above the failing colony. What are you planning, Commander Walker? Something that would have been insane in combat, she replied, a grim smile playing at her lips. We're going to use the ship's main power core to jumpstart your colony systems. The same energy feed that once powered our main guns will now power your life support. That's impossible, one of the Zixthulian engineers protested. The power transfer alone would be exactly like transferring emergency power to a damaged ship during battle. Chen interrupted, already running calculations. We're just scaling it up. The next 10 minutes were a masterclass in human crisis response. Heavy lift shuttles, once used to transport military hardware, now carried massive power converters. Engineering teams worked with the same speed and precision they had once used to repair battle damage. Power linkage in 3, 2, 1. Hayes called out the countdown. The Mercy's engines roared as they diverted maximum power to the colony's failing systems. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the colony's environmental systems began to reactivate. The main processor core stabilized, its bioneural interfaces protected by the same energy that had once powered the most devastating weapons in human space. Life support restored to 80% and rising, Hayes reported, unable to keep the relief from her voice. Environmental systems are stabilizing. Dr. Vexthal's medical scanners confirmed the impossible. The power transfer It's not just supporting the systems. The energy field is actually inhibiting the plague's ability to corrupt the bioneural network. Commander Walker finally allowed her battle stance to relax slightly. Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unlikely places. We built this ship to win wars. We just never specified what kind of wars we'd be fighting. Victory had a different taste on the bridge of the UNSS Mercy. Instead of battle reports and damage assessments, the screens displayed recovery statistics and treatment success rates. Commander Walker stood at her station, watching as the tactical display showed the plague's retreat across multiple colony worlds. Medical teams report 90% success rate with the modified vaccine, Lieutenant Hayes announced, her voice carrying the same pride that had once accompanied news of enemy ships destroyed. The BioShield network is holding steady at all major population centers. Dr. Vexthal's analysis scales were almost vibrating with excitement as they studied the data streams. The integration of human military precision with our medical technology. It's revolutionary. Your battle coordination software has cut treatment distribution time by 60%. Incoming priority signal from the outer rim, Hayes called out suddenly. Multiple colony ships detected. They're running from something. Walker's expression shifted back to combat ready. Show me. The main display lit up with a new threat. A massive wave of refugee vessels, each one potentially carrying both survivors and the plague. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a logistical nightmare. But these weren't normal circumstances. Deploy the response net, Walker ordered, her voice carrying the same authority that had once directed fleet actions. The massive holographic display that had once tracked enemy movements now showed a complex web of medical response vectors. High Commander Soth watched in fascination as the human crews seamlessly transitioned into what they called mass rescue protocol. The same systems that had once coordinated fighter squadrons now directed medical transport ships. Former weapon targeting arrays calculated optimal approach vectors for emergency docking. Launch medical response teams Alpha through Delta, Walker commanded. I want trade stations set up in all former combat launch bays. Engineering, reroute power from the secondary weapon systems to expand our quarantine fields. Chen's voice came over the comm from engineering. Already on it, Commander. We're converting the old shield harmonics to create sterilization fields. These refugees won't just find safety, they'll find healing. The next hours were a symphony of repurposed military might. The Mercy's massive hangar bays, once home to squadrons of strike fighters, transformed into reception centers for the sick and wounded. Former combat medics moved with practiced precision, their battlefield experience proving invaluable in managing the crisis. Sir, Hayes called out, her voice tight with concern. We're detecting signs of engine stress in several of the refugee ships. They've been running too hot for too long. Walker's response was immediate. Deploy the recovery drones. Full emergency protocol. Dr. Vextal watched in amazement as squadrons of drones, originally designed for battlefield recovery of damaged fighters, swarmed out to support the struggling ships. Their programming, once focused on preserving military assets, now worked to save civilian lives. Your engineers, Kizoth observed through the command link, they don't even hesitate. Every military system, every combat protocol, they instantly see how to turn it to healing. Because that's what these ships were always meant for, Walker replied, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Protection, defense, preservation of life. We just never realized that the best way to protect wasn't always through force. The display updated with new data, success rates, recovery statistics, lives saved. Where kill counts had once been tallied, now medical victories were recorded. The same precision that had made humans feared in combat now made them invaluable in crisis. Commander, Hayes called out, a note of pride in her voice. Final numbers coming in. Total refugee count, 27,812. Current survival rate, 98.7%. Walker allowed herself a small smile, not the fierce grin of combat victory, but the quiet satisfaction of lives preserved. Send word to all ships in the response network. This is how we fight now. Not with weapons, but with will. Not for territory, but for life itself. Dr. Vexthal's medical sensors recorded something unprecedented. A wave of hope spreading through the gathered refugees, as strong and clear as any vital sign they'd ever measured. The great hall of the Zixexthulian High Council had never before witnessed such a scene. Commander Jessica Walker stood before the assembled leaders, her white medical corps uniform, a stark contrast to the traditional combat dress that had once defined human military presence. High Commander Xoth addressed the council, their scales shifting through colors of pride and wonder. 3 standard weeks have passed since the UNSS Mercy entered our space. In that time, the death rate from the Crimson Plague has dropped from 87% to less than 2%. The massive display screens that had once tracked human military movements now showed a different kind of data. Recovery rates, treatment successes, lives saved. The numbers told a story that no Zixthulian could have imagined when the first alerts had sounded. The same tactical systems that once made humans our most feared adversaries, Dr. Vexthal reported to the assembly, have become the foundation of the most efficient medical response network in known space. Their battle coordination software, reprogrammed for medical logistics, has revolutionized our emergency response capabilities. Walker stepped forward when called upon, her bearing still that of a military commander, but her mission entirely transformed. The UNSS Mercy was once the U.S. Montana. She began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. She was built for war, designed to project power and protect human interests. But in the end, we found a better way to do both. The council chamber's holographic systems activated, showing the current deployment of the former human battle fleet. Where once they had struck fear, now they brought hope. The dreadnought turned hospital ship Thunder's Grace coordinating relief efforts in the outer colonies. The converted strike cruiser Starlight Healer establishing medical supply lines through previously contested space. We've submitted the technical specifications for the medical conversion process to your engineering teams, Walker continued. Every weapon system, every combat protocol, every bit of military technology, all repurposed for healing. Because that's what these ships were always meant for, protecting life. The head of the Zixexthulian Science Council rose, their ceremonial robes shimmering. We have analyzed the human methods, their approach to crisis response. It's unlike anything we've seen. They don't just adapt their technology. They transform its very purpose. Lieutenant Hayes, standing at Walker's side, activated a new display showing the latest innovation. Former combat drones, once designed for battlefield recovery, now serving as rapid response medical units throughout Zixthulian space. The emergency alert that once warned of human warships, Xoth addressed the council, must now be rewritten. When human vessels enter our space, the first question we ask will no longer be, what are they here to take? But rather, what do they come to give? The council chamber erupted in the traditional colors of agreement as the new protocols were enacted. Warning systems once calibrated to detect human military signatures were reprogrammed to welcome their approach. Defense grids transformed into emergency response networks. Walker's final words to the council echoed through the chamber. The U.S. Montana was built to win wars. The UNSS Mercy was born to end them. Not through force of arms, but through the greater power of healing. Today, we don't just mark the end of a crisis. We celebrate the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. As the council session concluded, Dr. Vexthal approached Walker with a final report. Their medical sensors had recorded something unprecedented. The traditional fear response that had once accompanied human presence had been replaced by something new, something that their translators identify as hope. High Commander Kzoth made the final entry in the sector's historical records. Let it be known that on this day, we learned the true power of human military might, not in their capacity for destruction, but in their ability to transform the tools of war into instruments of life. The day a human warship crossed into our sector became the day we truly understood our former enemies and found in them our greatest allies.